They saw an old Honda and assumed she didn't belong. They never bothered to ask who she actually was. This lot is for people who can actually afford to work here, not for whatever you are. The words echoed through the empty parking garage, bouncing off concrete pillars and luxury vehicles that cost more than most people's annual salary. The woman in the BMW X7 stepped forward, Hermes Kelly bag swinging from her manicured fingers, platinum blonde hair catching the fluorescent light. Her eyes swept over the 1999 Honda Accord like it was roadkill someone had forgotten to scrape off the asphalt. She had no idea she was speaking to her new boss. And in exactly 14 hours, she would be begging that same woman not to end her 15-year career. The driver of the Honda said nothing. She simply opened her trunk and began unloading a cardboard box, methodically, precisely, as if cataloging every item for a report she already knew she would have to write. "Did you hear me?" The blonde woman's voice sharpened. "I said you need to move. This is executive parking, not the visitor lot, not the cleaning staff entrance. Executive." Still no response. Just the quiet shuffle of items being rearranged in the box. A photo frame placed on the left, pens aligned on the right, a cream-colored envelope tucked carefully at the bottom. The elevator dinged. A security guard stepped out, hand already reaching for his radio, badge glinting under the harsh garage lights. And the blonde woman smiled. "Finally. Kyle, this woman refuses to leave. She parked that thing." She gestured at the Honda like it might be contagious. "In an executive spot. I want her removed, now." The security guard looked at the Honda, looked at its driver. A black woman in her mid-40s, natural hair pulled back, no jewelry, no designer labels, nothing that screamed money or power or belonging. He unclipped his radio. "Dispatch, this is Brennan. We have a possible trespasser in executive parking. Black female, 40s, driving an old Honda, requesting backup." The woman by the Honda finally looked up. Her eyes were calm, too calm. The kind of calm that came from having seen this exact scenario play out 100 times before, and knowing exactly how it would end. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small notebook, and she began to write. If you're already satisfying frustrated at what's happening, hit that subscribe button. Because what happens next? Nobody saw it coming. 72 hours earlier, Renata Holloway sat in her one-bedroom apartment in Decatur, Georgia, surrounded by cardboard boxes that weren't quite packed. The Honda Accord was visible through her window. Same navy blue paint her father had chosen 22 years ago, same dent in the rear bumper from the time she'd backed into a mailbox during her first driving lesson. 243,000 miles on the odometer and counting. Her father had driven that car to work every day for 2 decades, to church on Sundays, to her high school graduation, her college graduation, her law school graduation. He'd driven it to the hospital the night her mother passed, and he'd driven it home alone afterward, pulling into the driveway at 3 a.m. and sitting in the darkness for an hour before coming inside. When he died 8 years ago, the lawyers had asked if she wanted to sell it. Market value? $1,400, maybe less. She'd kept it. Some things weren't about market value. Her phone buzzed. Email notification. She picked it up, read it once, then read it again. From HR-executive@athon.com to R. Holloway at redacted. Date: Thursday, March 14, 2024, 3:47 p.m. Subject: Onboarding, Regional Director position. Dear Ms. Holloway, your start date is confirmed for Monday, March 18. Executive parking badge will be issued upon arrival. Please report to Suite 4200. Regards, Human Resources Regional Director, Southeast Division, Georgia, Florida, Alabama, Tennessee. 212 employees under her oversight. A corner office on the 42nd floor. A salary that could have bought her a new car 5 times over. She didn't reply immediately. Instead, she opened her notebook, the same leather-bound notebook she'd carried through 15 years of corporate litigation, and wrote, "Email received, 3:47 p.m. Badge pending. Arrive Sunday p.m. to familiarize layout. She always wrote things down, everything. Times, dates, names, exact words spoken. It was a habit from her years as a trial attorney, back when a single, misremembered detail could cost a client millions. Back when documentation wasn't just procedure, it was survival. She closed the notebook and looked at the boxes again. 15 years at Morrison & Kessler, one of Atlanta's most prestigious law firms. Senior partner track, corner office with a view of Centennial Park. And then the offer from Ethon Industries, in-house counsel position that had somehow morphed into regional director when the previous director resigned under circumstances no one wanted to discuss. She'd taken the job for reasons she hadn't fully explained to anyone. Not because of the money, not because of the title, because Ethon had a problem. A pattern of complaints that kept getting buried, settlements that kept getting sealed, employees who kept leaving without explanation. And Renata Holloway had spent her entire career making sure patterns didn't stay buried. She began packing again, photo frame on the left, pens on the right, cream envelope at the bottom, her official appointment letter signed by the CEO herself, everything in its place. Sunday afternoon, 4:23 p.m. Renata pulled the Honda onto I-85, heading toward the Ethon Industries headquarters in Midtown Atlanta. The building was a glass and steel monument to corporate ambition, 44 floors of logistics empire, visible from 3 miles away. She could have waited until Monday, should have, probably. But she'd learned long ago that the best way to understand an organization was to see it when no one was performing. Sunday afternoons, when the executives were at their golf clubs and the middle managers were at their kids' soccer games, that's when the real culture showed itself. The gas station on Peachtree Road was nearly empty. She pulled in, filled the tank, and walked inside to pay. The cashier, a young white man, maybe 22, name tag reading Tyler, looked at her, then looked out the window at the Honda, then looked back at her. "That your car?" She handed him a 20. "Yes." "You sure it's going to make it wherever you're going? Thing looks like it's held together with duct tape and prayers." She waited for her change. He counted it out slowly, still smirking. $12.47 is your change. Good luck out there." She took the bills without comment, but she kept the receipt, folded it once, tucked it into her wallet, right behind the business cards. Documentation. Always. Bumco. The main gate of Ethon Industries was closed on Sundays, but the employee entrance on the south side remained accessible. Renata pulled up to the intercom, pressed the button, and waited. Static. Then a voice, bored and vaguely hostile. "State your business." "I'm here to access Suite 4200. My name is Renata Holloway." A pause. The sound of keyboard clicking, maybe. Or maybe nothing at all. "Ma'am, executive suites are closed on Sundays. You got an appointment?" "I have an email confirming my access. I can forward it if you provide a number." Another pause. Longer this time. "Hold on." 30 seconds. 45. A minute. Then a click, and the gate began to swing open. "You're clear. Parking's on B1. Elevators are on the east side." She pulled through, but as she passed the gatehouse, she noticed the camera mounted above the entrance swivel to follow her car. Not unusual for a corporate facility. But the timing, the way it moved only after she'd been cleared, felt deliberate. Someone was watching. She filed that information away and kept driving. The B1 parking level was nearly empty. Sunday afternoon meant most spaces sat vacant, the fluorescent lights humming over acres of polished concrete. But the executive section, marked with a brass sign reading "Executive Parking Only," held a handful of vehicles: a Porsche Cayenne, a Mercedes S-Class, a Lexus LC, and one BMW X7, white, with a vanity plate that read LVNG LRG. Living large. Renata checked her email again. Space E17, reserved effective March 17th. She found the spot, between the Lexus and an empty space, and pulled in. The Honda looked absurdly out of place, like a sparrow that had wandered into an aviary of peacocks. She didn't care. She turned off the engine, and for a moment she just sat there, listening to the tick of cooling metal, feeling the familiar vibration of the steering wheel fade beneath her fingers. 243,000 miles. Still running. The trunk opened with its usual creak. She began unloading, the cardboard box with her personal items, her laptop bag, her briefcase. She arranged them on the concrete beside the car, then paused to survey her surroundings. 3 exits visible from this position. 2 stairwells, 1 elevator bank. Cameras at each corner. She counted 4, all positioned to cover the executive section. The lighting was adequate but not bright. Shadows pooled between the concrete pillars like dark water. She noted the location of the fire extinguisher, the emergency phone, the distance to the nearest pillar if she needed cover. Old habits. Trial lawyer habits. The kind of awareness that came from years of walking into hostile depositions and knowing that someone in the room wanted to destroy you. She picked up the box and turned toward the elevator. That's when the BMW's door opened. The woman who stepped out was somewhere in her early 50s, though the work she'd had done made it hard to tell. Platinum blonde hair blown out to perfection, a cream-colored cashmere sweater that probably cost more than Renata's first month's rent in law school, and eyes that assessed, calculated, and dismissed, all in the space of a single glance. "Excuse me?" Renata stopped. The box was balanced against her hip, laptop bag over one shoulder. "This isn't the visitor lot." The woman's voice carried the particular tone of someone accustomed to being obeyed. Not loud, just certain. The certainty of 15 years in the same building, the same parking spot, the same unquestioned authority. "You need to move that thing." Renata set the box down on the trunk of her car. Slowly, deliberately. "Good afternoon. I have authorization to park here." The woman's eyebrows rose. Not in surprise. In disbelief. The kind of disbelief that said she'd already decided what Renata was, and no amount of evidence would change that conclusion. "Authorization? Honey, I've worked here for 15 years. I know every face in this building." She stepped closer, heels clicking on concrete. "And I've never seen yours." The elevator dinged. The security guard who emerged was in his late 30s, built like someone who'd played football in high school and never quite let go of the glory days. His uniform was crisp, his badge polished, his hand already moving toward the radio on his belt. "Ms. Vance, everything okay?" The blonde woman, Vance, turned with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Kyle, thank God, this woman parked in the executive lot. In that." She pointed at the Honda like it was evidence in a criminal trial. "She claims she has authorization, but I've never seen her before in my life." The guard, Kyle, looked at Renata. His eyes did the same sweep Vance's had. Face, clothes, car. The same calculation, the same conclusion. "Ma'am, I'm going to need to see some ID." Renata reached into her purse, moving slowly, keeping her hands visible. She'd learned that lesson too, years ago, in a traffic stop that had gone sideways for no reason she could name, except the obvious one. "Of course." She handed over her Georgia driver's license. Kyle studied it, compared the photo to her face, then looked back at the Honda. "This says Decatur. You work here?" "I start Monday. I have an onboarding email confirming my parking access." Kyle frowned. Behind him, Vance crossed her arms. "Email's not credentials, ma'am. You got a badge?" "My badge will be issued Monday morning. The email specifically states that executive parking is available effective today." "Email's not—" "You said that." Renata's voice remained level. "And I'm asking you to verify my information with your supervisor before we proceed further." Kyle's frown deepened. This wasn't going the way these interactions usually went. The woman wasn't scared, wasn't apologetic, wasn't backing down. Vance stepped forward. "Kyle, she's stalling. Just call the tow truck and be done with it. Ms. Vance, I need to follow procedure. The procedure is that unauthorized vehicles get towed. That, another jab toward the Honda, is an unauthorized vehicle. It doesn't belong here, and neither does she. Renata picked up her notebook from the box, opened it, clicked her pen. For the record, I'm documenting this interaction. The time is 4:43 p.m., Sunday, March 17th, 2024. I've presented valid identification and offered to provide email confirmation of my parking authorization. I'm now requesting that security verify my status before any further action is taken. She looked up from the notebook. Is there a problem with that request? The parking garage had been quiet before. Now it felt like the air itself had thickened, tension coiling between the concrete pillars like something alive. Kyle looked at Vance. Vance looked at Renata. Renata kept writing. What are you doing? Vance's voice had shifted, higher, more uncertain. What is she writing? Documentation. Renata didn't look up. Badge number 742 on Officer Kyle's uniform. Meredith Vance. You introduced yourself when you first approached. White BMW X7, vanity plate LVNGLRG. Time of initial contact, approximately 4:38 p.m. You can't just... I can, and I am. Now Renata looked up, meeting Vance's eyes directly. I'm within my legal rights to document any interaction that may be relevant to a future complaint. Would you like to continue, or would you prefer to wait while Officer Kyle verifies my authorization? Silence. Kyle shifted his weight from one foot to the other. His hand was still near his radio, but he hadn't called dispatch yet. Something about this woman, the calm, the precision, the complete absence of fear, was making him reconsider. Ma'am, I can try to reach someone in security dispatch, but most systems are offline on Sundays. It might take a while. I'm happy to wait. Vance threw up her hands. This is ridiculous. Kyle, I'm telling you, she doesn't work here. She showed up in that piece of junk. She has no badge, no credentials, no business being in this building. If something goes missing, if there's a security breach, this is going to be on your head. Kyle's jaw tightened. The radio crackled. Just stay here. Both of you. I need to make a call. He stepped away toward the elevator bank, one hand pressed to the radio, voice too low to hear. And Vance, for the first time since the confrontation began, looked at Renata, really looked, and saw something that made her take a small step back. The woman wasn't angry. She was waiting. Like she knew exactly how this was going to end. The gate arm was already descending when Renata arrived, 4:38 p.m., according to the timestamp she'd write later. She'd cleared the intercom. The voice had said she was authorized, but as she pulled through, the barrier began its descent early, moving faster than it should have. She pressed the accelerator. Metal scraped against metal, a thin shriek as the barrier grazed the roof of the Honda, and then she was through, the arms slamming down behind her with a finality that felt deliberate. In her rearview mirror, the barrier, fully closed, the red light blinking. Coincidence, or a warning? She made a note, 4:38 p.m., gate closure, early. Possible malfunction or manual override. Check security logs. Then she kept driving. 3 minutes of your time is all it takes to hit subscribe. 3 minutes, less than you spend choosing what to watch. But that button, it helps stories like this reach millions. Kyle came back from his call looking less certain than before. Dispatch is checking the onboarding system. They said there's a pending entry, but the department field is blank. Blank means error. Vance pounced on the information like a cat on a wounded bird. Blank means she's lying. Kyle, just get her out. Blank could also mean the department hasn't been assigned yet. Renata kept her voice even. Some positions are classified above standard tier access. The system might not display my department until Monday, when the assignment goes live. Kyle blinked. How do you know how our system works? I read the onboarding documentation. It's publicly available on your company's HR portal. She paused. Section 4.2, if you'd like to verify. Silence again. Kyle's expression had shifted from suspicion to something else, something that looked almost like respect, or at least the reluctant recognition that he might be out of his depth, but Vance wasn't having it. Kyle, I don't care what section of what document she claims to have read. I know every executive in this company, every senior manager, every director and vice president, and I have never seen her face. She stepped closer to Renata, close enough that her perfume, something expensive and floral, filled the space between them. I don't know what game you're playing. I don't know if you're a reporter or a corporate spy or just some crazy woman who wandered in off the street. But I'm going to find out. And when I do... Ms. Vance, Renata's voice cut through like a blade. You're standing very close to me. I'm asking you to step back. Vance didn't move. Or what? Or I'll add intimidation to the list of items I'm documenting, along with the racial comments you made earlier. I didn't say anything about race. You said this lot is for people who can afford to work here. You asked if I was cleaning staff or cafeteria. You've questioned my presence based solely on my appearance and the car I drive. Renata's pen moved across the page. A pattern of comments that, taken together, could be interpreted as discriminatory. I'm sure Athon's legal department would find that interesting. Vance's face went red. How dare you? I'm not accusing you of anything, Ms. Vance. I'm documenting. There's a difference. Renata looked up. Now, are you going to step back, or should I note that you refused my request? For a long moment, nothing happened. Then Vance took a single step backward. Kyle. Her voice was shaking now, with rage, with humiliation, with something that might have been the first flicker of fear. Get her out of here, now! I don't care what you have to do. Kyle hesitated. He looked at Renata. The calm face, the steady hands, the notebook filled with precise documentation. Then he reached for his handcuffs. Yo. The click of metal was loud in the empty garage. Ma'am, I'm going to need you to turn around. Renata didn't move. Am I under arrest? You're being detained pending verification. Detained requires reasonable suspicion of a crime. What crime am I suspected of? Kyle's hand hovered over the cuffs on his belt. He'd done this before, probably dozens of times. People who didn't belong, people who argued, people who made his job harder than it needed to be. But something about this woman's voice, the way she asked questions like a lawyer, not a suspect, was making him hesitate. Trespassing, he said finally. Criminal trespass under Georgia law. Georgia Code Section 16721 requires that I remain on the premises after receiving lawful notice to depart. Renata's voice was still calm, terrifyingly calm. I've been here less than 20 minutes. I've presented valid identification. I've offered to provide email confirmation of my authorization. The only notice I've received is a verbal demand from a private citizen with no authority to issue such orders. She paused. Has your supervisor verified my status yet? Kyle said nothing. Has anyone attempted to call HR? The onboarding department? The executive suite? Still nothing. So you're planning to physically detain me based solely on the word of a woman who admits she's never seen me before, without completing any verification of my actual authorization. She closed her notebook. Is that accurate, Officer Brennan? The use of his name, she'd read it off his badge 20 minutes ago, landed like a slap. Behind him, Vance's voice rose to a near shriek. Kyle! Stop talking to her and do something! Kyle's hand moved to the cuffs. Turn around, ma'am. Hands behind your back. So, Renata turned. She moved slowly, deliberately, keeping her hands visible at all times. She'd done this before, too. Not personally, but professionally. She'd represented clients who'd been in this exact position, clients who'd been handcuffed and detained and humiliated for the crime of existing in spaces where they weren't expected. She knew the law, she knew the procedure, and she knew that resistance, even justified resistance, could get her killed. So she turned, She placed her hands behind her back, and she spoke, loudly and clearly, for every camera in the garage to hear. "I am not resisting. I am complying with a detention order that I believe to be unlawful. The time is 4:52 p.m., Sunday, March 17th, 2024. Officer Kyle Brennan, badge number 742, is placing me in handcuffs at the request of Meredith Vance. No verification of my authorization has been completed. No crime has been alleged beyond the unsubstantiated claim that I don't belong here." Cold metal closed around her wrists. Click, click. "I will be filing a formal complaint with Aethon Industries, the Atlanta Police Department, and the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission." Behind her, Vance laughed. "The EEOC? Honey, you need to actually work here to file a complaint with them." Renata said nothing. But somewhere in the elevator bank, another set of doors opened, and a voice, male, calm, authoritative, cut through the tension. "Brennan, what the hell is going on here?" "Shush." The man who emerged from the elevator wore a different uniform, darker, with a patch on the shoulder that read Night Shift Supervisor. He was tall, black, somewhere in his late 40s, with the kind of bearing that suggested he'd seen more than his share of situations like this. "Washington." Kyle's voice had changed, less certain now, almost defensive. "We have a trespasser. Ms. Vance called it in." The supervisor, Washington, looked at Renata, at the handcuffs, at the Honda, at the box of personal items still sitting on the trunk. Then he looked at Vance. "Ms. Vance, did you personally verify this woman's credentials before calling security?" Vance's chin lifted. "I don't need to verify anything. I know everyone who works here, and she doesn't." "That's a no." Washington turned to Kyle. "Did you verify her credentials before putting her in cuffs?" "I checked with dispatch. They said her status was pending. Pending, not denied. Pending." Washington's voice sharpened. "Did you access the onboarding system yourself, or did you just take someone's word for it?" Silence. Washington pulled a tablet from under his arm. His fingers moved across the screen with the speed of someone who'd done this 1,000 times. "Holloway, R." He read from the screen. "Pending badge assignment. Department, blank. Start date, March 18th. He looked up. "Space assignment, E17. Effective date, March 17th. He turned the tablet around so everyone could see. "That's today. That's this space." He pointed at the Honda, still parked exactly where the email had specified. "She's authorized. She's been authorized all along." Vance's face went white. That can't be. Kyle, you said—" "I said pending," Kyle interrupted, his voice cracking. "I didn't say unauthorized. I said pending." "And you put her in handcuffs because her status was pending?" Washington stepped forward. "Take them off, now." "I was just following—" "Now, Brennan." The handcuffs came off with the same click they'd gone on. Just metal, nothing personal, nothing that would leave a mark. But Renata knew better. Some marks didn't show on the skin. She rubbed her wrists, more out of habit than pain, and reached for her notebook. Washington watched her, something shifting behind his eyes. "Ma'am, I apologize for this. I saw the whole thing on the security monitor upstairs. I came down as fast as I could." "Thank you, Mr. Washington." She wrote the time. 4:58 p.m. Handcuffs removed. Night Supervisor Terrell Washington intervened. "How long were you watching before you came down?" A pause. Just a fraction of a second too long. "Long enough to know what I saw." She nodded once. "Then you'll be able to confirm everything when I request the security footage." Washington's expression didn't change, but something in his posture shifted. A subtle straightening, a recalibration. "Yes, ma'am. I'll make sure it's preserved." Vance was backing toward the elevator now, Hermes' bag clutched to her chest like a shield. "This isn't... You can't just..." "Kyle, You're a witness. She threatened me. She said she was going to file complaints. She was trying to intimidate. Ms. Vance, Renata's voice stopped her mid-retreat. You might want to reconsider what you say next. Mr. Washington just confirmed that he was watching on the security monitor, which means there's a recording, which means everything you've said and done in the last 20 minutes is documented. She tucked the notebook back into her bag. I'd be careful about adding false statements to the list. The elevator bank was quiet now. Vance had retreated upstairs, muttering about lawyers and HR and we'll see about this. Kyle had been dismissed by Washington, sent back to his station with a warning look that suggested a longer conversation was coming. Only Washington remained, standing by the Honda like a sentinel. Ms. Holloway. His voice was different now, quieter, more personal. Can I ask you something? Go ahead. The way you handled that, the documentation, the case law, the way you knew exactly what to say and when to say it. He studied her face. You've done this before. It wasn't a question. I've been in rooms where the outcome was already decided before I walked in, she said. I learned to create my own record. Washington nodded slowly. I've seen your file, he said. The real one, not the pending entry in the onboarding system. She met his eyes. Then you know I don't need anyone to rescue me. Yes, ma'am. He glanced toward the elevator, where Kyle had disappeared. But you shouldn't have to rescue yourself. Not like this. Not here. A long silence stretched between them. Mr. Washington, I'm going to ask you a question, and I'd appreciate an honest answer. Ask. This kind of thing. Employees stopped in the parking lot, questioned without verification, detained or removed based on how they look. How often does it happen? Washington's jaw tightened. More often than it should. Is there documentation? Another pause. He seemed to be weighing something. Loyalty versus conscience, perhaps. Or maybe just the risk of telling the truth to someone he'd only just met. There might be, he said finally. If someone knew where to look. Renata picked up her box from the trunk of the Honda. I know where to look, Mr. Washington. It's my job. She started toward the elevator, then stopped. One more thing. The gate arm, when I drove in, it came down early. Almost caught my roof. Is that normal? Washington's expression flickered. No, he said, it's not. Shh. The security office was a windowless room on the B1 level, wedged between a maintenance closet and a server room that hummed with the white noise of 1,000 processors. Renata sat in a plastic chair that had seen better days, her wrists still tingling from the handcuffs, her notebook open on her lap. Kyle Brennan stood in the corner, arms crossed, avoiding eye contact. His radio had been silent since Washington took over, but every few minutes his hand would drift toward it. A nervous habit, maybe, or wishful thinking that backup was on the way. Washington was at the computer terminal, scrolling through something on the screen. Badge assignment's been updated, he said. Effective immediately. You're cleared for all executive areas, including after-hours access. Thank you. But I'm going to need you to stay here for a few more minutes while I pull the incident footage. He glanced at Kyle. Standard procedure when there's a detention. The footage gets logged and time-stamped before anyone leaves. Kyle shifted his weight. Is that really necessary? She's authorized now. We can just let her go and... We're not letting her go, Brennan. We're following procedure. Washington's voice carried an edge that hadn't been there before. The same procedure you were supposed to follow before you put her in cuffs. Silence. The computer beeped. Washington frowned at the screen. That's strange. What? Your body cam footage, Brennan. Washington pointed at a status bar. It shows upload pending, but the file size is 0. When did you turn it on? Kyle's face went pale. It should have been on the whole time. It's supposed to auto-record when I'm on duty. It's supposed to, yeah. Washington's fingers flew across the keyboard. But according to this log, your camera was manually switched to standby at 4:41 p.m., 3 minutes after you arrived at the scene. The implications hung in the air like smoke. Renata wrote in her notebook, "Body cam disabled, 4:41 p.m., manual override. Footage may be missing or deleted." "That's not... I didn't..." Kyle was sputtering now, his earlier authority crumbling like wet sand. "Someone must have... The system glitches sometimes. Save it." Washington was already plugging a USB drive into the terminal. "I'm pulling the backup from local cache. If there's anything recoverable, I'm going to find it." His fingers moved faster. 47%, 68%. The door to the security office opened. A new figure stepped in. Tall, thin, wire-rimmed glasses, suit that probably cost more than Kyle's monthly salary. His eyes swept the room with the cold efficiency of a calculator processing a math problem. "Washington." The man's voice was flat, devoid of warmth. "What are you doing with that terminal?" "Preserving evidence, Mr. Pike." Washington didn't look up. "We had an incident in the parking garage. Detention without verification. I'm pulling footage before it gets lost in the system." "That's not your job. System access is my department. And incident documentation is mine." Washington's fingers kept moving. 89%. Pike stepped closer, his presence suddenly filling the room. "I'm ordering you to stop that download." "On what grounds?" "On the grounds that you're accessing systems above your clearance level without authorization." Washington finally looked up. His expression was calm, but his eyes were hard. "Mr. Pike, I have a written detention report, an employee who was handcuffed without proper verification, and body cam footage that mysteriously went dark during the incident. If I stop this download and that footage disappears, I'm the one who's going to have to explain why to Internal Affairs." He turned back to the screen. 94%. Pike's hand shot toward the keyboard, and Washington pulled the USB drive free. "Done." He tucked the drive into his chest pocket, his hand lingering there a moment longer than necessary. "Chain of custody starts now. This drive doesn't leave my possession until I hand it directly to an IA investigator or company counsel." He looked at Pike. "You want to explain to them why you tried to stop me from preserving it?" Pike's jaw worked silently. Then, without a word, he turned and walked out of the room. Check it. The corridor outside the security office was long and poorly lit. Fluorescent panels flickering overhead, shadows pooling in the corners like something waiting to be noticed. Renata walked toward the parking garage elevator, box balanced on her hip, laptop bag over her shoulder. Washington had insisted on escorting her, but she'd declined. She didn't need an escort. What she needed was information. She was halfway to the elevator when the voices stopped her. 3 people. Coming from the stairwell to her left. 2 women, one blonde, one brunette, and a man she didn't recognize. Tall, dark suit, the kind of build that suggested either a gym membership or a history of violence. Maybe both. Meredith Vance stepped out first, her earlier fear replaced by something sharper, hungrier. "Going somewhere?" Behind her, the brunette, younger, assistant age, holding a phone that was definitely recording, moved to block the corridor. And the man in the suit simply stood there, hands clasped in front of him, eyes flat and unreadable. "Ms. Vance?" Renata kept her voice neutral. "I thought you went upstairs." "I did, and then I made a few calls." Vance smiled. "This is Marcus Holt. He's a consultant for Athon, handles special situations." The man, Holt, inclined his head slightly. Not a greeting, an assessment. "Miss Holloway, I understand there was a misunderstanding in the parking garage. Is that what we're calling it now?" "I'm calling it a situation that can be resolved quietly, professionally, without the need for formal complaints or legal involvement." He took a step closer. Not aggressive, just encroaching. "Athon is a large company, Ms. Holloway. We have resources, lawyers, connections, the kind of institutional backing that can make certain problems go away." "Is this a threat, Mr. Holt?" "It's advice." His voice was smooth as silk. You're one person with an old car and a grievance. The question you should be asking yourself is whether this is really the hill you want to die on. Renata set down her box. Let me make something clear, Mr. Holt. I haven't filed a complaint yet. I haven't called anyone. I've simply documented an interaction and requested verification of my credentials. Verification that has since been provided. She met his eyes. But if you continue to obstruct my exit from this building, I will file a complaint. Not just with HR. With the Atlanta Police Department for unlawful detention. With the EEOC for discriminatory treatment. And with Athon's legal department for witness intimidation. She picked up her box. Now, you have exactly 3 seconds to step aside, or this becomes an unlawful detention. Silence. The brunette's phone was still recording. Renata could see the red light blinking. Good. 1. Holt's expression didn't change. 2. Vance's smile had frozen on her face. 3. Vance stepped aside first, then the brunette, scrambling to get out of the way. And finally, reluctantly, Holt moved, just enough to let her pass. Renata walked through the gap without breaking stride. This isn't over, Vance called after her. Renata didn't turn around. I know. The elevator ride to B1 was silent, except for the hum of machinery and the soft ding of passing floors. Renata stood in the center of the car, box balanced on her hip, eyes fixed on the descending numbers. 7, 6, 5. Her hands weren't shaking. They rarely did anymore. She'd trained herself out of that years ago, in courtrooms where a trembling hand could be read as weakness, where every gesture was scrutinized for signs of fear or doubt. But her heart was pounding. She could feel it in her chest, in her throat, in the tips of her fingers. 4, 3. The doors opened. The parking garage stretched out before her. Same concrete pillars, same fluorescent hum, same Honda Accord waiting exactly where she'd left it. 2. She stepped out of the elevator and saw them. 3 security guards. Not Kyle. Different uniforms, different badges, different postures. They stood between her and her car, arranged in a loose semicircle that said casual but meant containment. Ms. Holloway? The one in front, heavy-set, buzz-cut, name tag reading Parsons, held up a hand. We need you to stop right there. On whose authority? Mr. Pike's. There's been a development. We need to escort you to a secure location while we sort it out. What kind of development? That's above my pay grade, ma'am. I just need you to come with us. Renata didn't move. Her eyes swept the garage. Exits, cameras, distances. The same assessment she'd done an hour ago. But this time, the variables had changed. Am I under arrest? No, ma'am. Am I being detained? Parsons hesitated. The guards behind him exchanged glances. We're asking you to cooperate. Then I'm declining to cooperate. She took a step toward her car. Unless you have legal authority to detain me, I'm leaving. Parsons moved to block her path. Ma'am, I really think you should. Parsons. The voice came from behind Renata, sharp, commanding, cutting through the tension like a blade. Washington emerged from the elevator, tablet in hand, badge prominently displayed. Step back, now. Parsons looked at Pike's men, then at Washington, then back at Renata. His expression said he'd been given orders, but the voice in front of him carried more immediate authority. Sir, Mr. Pike said, I don't care what Pike said. This woman is a cleared employee. She has authorization to be here. She has authorization to leave. Washington stepped forward until he was between Renata and the guards. If you try to stop her, I will document every second of it and have it on the chief security officer's desk within the hour. Silence. Then, one by one, the guards stepped aside. Renata walked to her car, opened the trunk, loaded her box, closed it. The Honda's engine turned over on the first try, 243,000 miles and counting. She pulled out of Space E-17, past the guards, past the cameras, past the barriers that had almost clipped her roof on the way in. At the exit gate, she stopped. Washington was standing by the gatehouse, tablet still in hand. "Ma'am?" He nodded once. "Be careful tomorrow." "I will." "And Ms. Holloway?" He leaned closer to her window. "The footage from tonight, the parking lot cameras, the hallway outside the security office, all of it, I'm putting it on a separate server, one that Pike doesn't have access to." She looked at him for a long moment. "Why are you helping me, Mr. Washington?" He glanced back at the building, the 44 floors of glass and steel, the cameras watching, the machinery of corporate power humming in the darkness. "Because I've been here 14 years, he said quietly, "and I've seen this happen too many times to look away." The gate opened. Renata drove through. "So, the story's just getting started. Follow now, because tomorrow morning, when that boardroom door opens, everything changes. And trust me, you don't want to miss what happens next." The apartment in Decatur was dark when Renata got home. She sat in the Honda for a few minutes, engine off, hands still on the steering wheel. The events of the afternoon played back in her mind like a legal briefing, each moment cataloged, analyzed, filed away for future reference. Vance, Brennan, Pike, Holt, and Washington, the one variable she hadn't expected. She took her phone out of her purse and scrolled to the email from HR, read it again, then opened a new message. To vhartwell@ethan.com. Subject: Incident Report. Sunday, March 17th, 2024. CEO Hartwell, I am writing to formally report an incident that occurred this afternoon at Ethon Industries headquarters. While preparing for my Monday start date as Regional Director, Southeast Division, I was detained, handcuffed, and threatened by company personnel. Full documentation attached. I am requesting an immediate meeting to discuss next steps. Renata Holloway. She hit send. Then she went inside, poured herself a glass of water, and began typing up her notes from the evening. Every word, every timestamp, every name and badge number. Documentation. Always documentation. The email response came at 11:47 p.m. from v.hartwell@athon.com to r.holloway at subject incident report, Sunday, March 17th, 2024. Ms. Holloway, I've reviewed the footage. Please come directly to my office at 7:45 a.m. tomorrow, before the leadership meeting. We have much to discuss. Victoria Hartwell, CEO, Athon Industries. Monday morning, 7:30 a.m. Renata pulled the Honda into Space E17 for the second time in 16 hours. The garage was fuller now, more executives arriving, more luxury vehicles gliding into their designated spots. But no one approached her. No one looked at her twice. She took the elevator to the 42nd floor. The executive suite was all glass and chrome, the kind of carefully curated minimalism that cost a fortune to achieve and maintain. A receptionist in a tailored blazer looked up as Renata approached. "Ms. Holloway, CEO Hartwell is expecting you. Conference room 4201. The walk to the conference room felt longer than it should have. Each step measured, each breath controlled. Through the glass walls, she could see the Atlanta skyline, the morning sun catching the tops of buildings like fire. She paused outside the door. Inside, she could hear voices. Hartwell's, clipped and professional, and another, male, older, with the measured tones of someone accustomed to being obeyed. Jeffrey Stanton, CFO, the man who'd mentored Meredith Vance for 15 years. Renata straightened her suit jacket. Then she opened the door. The conference room was enormous. A long mahogany table, leather chairs, screens built into every wall. At the head of the table sat Victoria Hartwell, CEO, a woman in her early 60s with silver hair and the kind of presence that made everyone else in the room seem slightly smaller. To her right, Jeffrey Stanton, CFO, looking like he'd swallowed something unpleasant. To her left, Harrison Locke, HR director, with a tablet in front of him and an expression that suggested he'd already calculated how much this incident was going to cost. And at the far end of the table, partially hidden by the angle of the door, Meredith Vance, pale, tired, the confidence from yesterday completely gone. "Ms. Holloway." Hartwell's voice was neutral, neither warm nor cold. "Please, sit down." Renata chose a seat near the middle of the table, close enough to see everyone's faces, far enough to maintain her own space. "Before we begin," Hartwell continued, "I want you to know that I've reviewed the security footage from yesterday. All of it. Including the footage that Mr. Pike attempted to delete before Night Supervisor Washington preserved it." At the far end of the table, Vance flinched. "I've also reviewed the incident logs from the past 18 months. Hartwell's eyes swept the room. "And I've found a pattern." She pressed a button, and the wall screen lit up with a list of names. M. Jackson, November 2022. D. Williams, February 2023. T. Okafor, July 2023. S. Robinson, October 2023. K. Mensah, January 2024. R. Holloway, March 2024. 6 names, 6 incidents, every single one involving a black employee or visitor. Every single one dismissed as a misunderstanding or resolved without further action. 6 people in 18 months, Hartwell said quietly. All stopped, all questioned, all removed from the premises based on how they looked, before anyone bothered to verify their credentials. She looked at Vance. "And Ms. Vance, you were present for or directly involved in 3 of those incidents." Vance opened her mouth to speak, but Hartwell raised a hand. "I'm not finished." The next 30 minutes felt like an autopsy. Hartwell walked through each incident, the dates, the circumstances, the complete absence of disciplinary action. She cited policy numbers and legal precedents. She referenced emails that had been buried, complaints that had been resolved with a single interview, footage that had mysteriously disappeared before it could be reviewed. Stanton tried to interrupt twice. Both times, Hartwell shut him down with a look that could have frozen nitrogen. "This isn't an isolated incident," she said finally. "This is a pattern that exposes this company to significant legal liability under Title VII of the Civil Rights Act." She turned to Renata. "Ms. Holloway, you have a law degree, 15 years of litigation experience, and, as of this morning, you're the regional director for our largest division." She paused. "What do you think should happen next?" Renata opened her folder. The cream-colored envelope was on top, her appointment letter still in its original condition. "I think you should bring in an external investigator," she said. "Someone with no ties to anyone in this room. Someone who can conduct interviews without management present, review 5 years of security logs, and determine whether this pattern is limited to these 6 incidents or goes deeper." Stanton leaned forward. "Now hold on. An external investigation is expensive, time-consuming, and could expose the company to—" "Mr. Stanton," Renata's voice was calm, "I was handcuffed in your parking garage yesterday, based solely on the color of my skin and the car I drive. Officer Brennan's body cam was manually disabled during the incident. Mr. Pike attempted to delete the security footage before it could be preserved, and Mr. Holt, your consultant, cornered me in a hallway and suggested I should reconsider pursuing this matter." She placed her notebook on the table. "I have documentation of everything. Times, dates, names, exact words spoken. The EEOC filing deadline is 180 days. If you'd prefer to handle this internally, I'm willing to cooperate, but only if the investigation is conducted by someone who has no stake in protecting the people responsible." Stanton's face was red, but Hartwell was nodding. "I agree," the CEO said. "Effective immediately. I'm engaging Janet Okonkwo from Okonkwo and Associates to conduct an independent review. Ms. Vance and Officer Brennan are suspended with pay pending the outcome. Mr. Pike will be reassigned to administrative duties." Vance's head snapped up. "Victoria, you can't—" "I can." Hartwell's voice was ice. "And I am. This meeting is adjourned. Ms. Holloway, please stay. The room emptied slowly. Stanton left first, jaw clenched, already reaching for his phone. Locke followed, tablet clutched to his chest. Vance was last, moving like a sleepwalker, her earlier confidence reduced to rubble. At the door, she stopped. I didn't know. Her voice was barely above a whisper. I didn't know who you were. Renata looked at her for a long moment. That's the problem, Ms. Vance. You never even thought to ask. Vance held her gaze for a second longer. Then she turned and walked out, the door clicking shut behind her. Only Hartwell remained. That was well handled, the CEO said. I wasn't trying to handle it. Renata closed her folder. I was trying to document it. Same skill set. Hartwell leaned back in her chair. I'll be honest with you, Ms. Holloway. When I hired you, I knew you'd find things we'd rather keep buried. That's why I hired you. This company has been coasting on its reputation for too long. We need someone who's willing to turn over rocks even when what's underneath is ugly. And if what's underneath goes higher than a few security guards and a middle manager? Hartwell's expression didn't change. Then we turn over more rocks. The rest of Monday passed in a blur of meetings, introductions, and paperwork. By 6 p.m., Renata had a corner office, a badge that actually worked, and a growing sense that the problems at Aethon went far deeper than anyone was willing to admit. She stayed late, reading through the files Washington had copied to the secure server. Incident reports, email chains, memos marked confidential that should never have been written down. At 9:47 p.m., her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She answered anyway. Ms. Holloway? The voice was young, female, nervous. My name is Keisha Mensah. I was supposed to have an interview at Aethon last year. I was turned away at the door. They said there was a scheduling error. But I saw the news about what happened to you and I know who you are, Ms. Mensah. Renata reached for her notebook. I've read your file. Then you know what they did, what they've been doing. A shaky breath. I want to help. I want to tell someone what happened to me. But I'm scared. They're a big company. They have lawyers. They have... Ms. Mensah. Renata's voice was gentle but firm. I'm going to give you a phone number. It's for Janet Okonkwo. She's an external investigator. She's going to be looking into the pattern of discrimination at Aethon. And your experience is part of that pattern. But what if they already did? The question now is whether we let them get away with it. Silence on the line. Then, okay, give me the number. 10:14 p.m. Renata pulled into her parking spot in Decatur, the Honda's engine ticking in the quiet night. Her phone buzzed again. This time, no caller ID, no number at all. She opened the message. From, blocked sender, subject, no subject. You think you won? This isn't over. Some of us have been here longer than you, and will be here after you're gone. Watch your back. She stared at the screen for a long moment. Then she opened her notebook, wrote down the time and the exact text of the message, and saved a screenshot. Documentation. Always documentation. The engine turned over. 243,000 miles and counting. She pulled into the garage and killed the headlights. Somewhere in the darkness, a camera was watching. Recording. Always recording. 3 weeks after the parking garage incident, Renata Holloway sat in her corner office on the 42nd floor, watching the Atlanta skyline shift from gray to gold as the sun set behind the clouds. The investigation was underway. Janet Okonkwo had arrived the Monday after the board meeting, a woman in her late 50s with silver-streaked locks, reading glasses perpetually perched on her nose, and the kind of quiet intensity that made people nervous without quite knowing why. She'd set up in a conference room on the 38th floor, away from executive eyes, and begun conducting interviews. 47 interviews in 3 weeks. Security personnel, HR staff, employees who'd filed complaints that had been dismissed, employees who'd witnessed incidents but never reported them, and witnesses who'd suddenly become very hard to find. Renata's phone buzzed. Text message from a blocked number. She didn't need to open it to know what it would say. The messages had become a nightly occurrence. Always after 9 p.m., always from untraceable sources, always some variation of the same theme. You're not safe here. We know where you park. This isn't your company. Watch your back. She documented each one, saved screenshots, forwarded copies to Okonkwo and to her own attorney, Marcus Chen Reyes, who she'd retained the day after the incident. Documentation. Always documentation. The first sign that something was wrong came on a Tuesday morning, 4 weeks into the investigation. Renata arrived at 7:15 a.m. earlier than usual to find Terrell Washington's desk empty. Not unusual by itself, he worked nights after all. But his personal items were gone. The photo of his daughter that usually sat by his monitor, the coffee mug with the Army Rangers logo, the small plant he'd been nursing back to health for 6 months. All gone. She found the resignation letter in her inbox at 7:22 a.m. from twashington@ethan.com. To HR personnel at ethan.com, CCR Holloway at ethan.com. Date Tuesday, April 16, 2024, 6:47 a.m. Subject, resignation. Effective immediately. To whom it may concern, I am submitting my resignation from Ethon Industries, effective immediately, for personal reasons. I have enjoyed my 14 years with the company and wish everyone well. Terrell Washington. Personal reasons. Renata read the email 3 times. Then she picked up her phone and dialed Washington's personal number, the one he'd given her the night of the incident, just in case. It rang once, twice, 3 times. Then, the number you have reached is no longer in service. She tried again. Same message. She sent a text. From R. Holloway to T. Washington. Date, April 16, 2024, 7:31 a.m. Mr. Washington, I saw your resignation. I hope everything is okay. If there's anything I can do to help, please let me know. The message showed as delivered. No response. E. The investigation continued without Washington, but his absence left a hole that couldn't easily be filled. He'd been the one who preserved the footage, the one who documented the chain of custody, the one whose testimony would have connected the individual incident to the broader pattern. Without him, the case was weaker. Okonkwo knew it. Renata knew it. And somewhere in the building, the people who'd sent those threatening messages knew it too. He was the key witness. Okonkwo's voice was matter-of-fact as she sat across from Renata in the 38th floor conference room. The security footage he preserved is admissible, but his testimony about the context, Pike's attempted deletion, the pattern he'd observed over 14 years, that's harder to reconstruct from documents alone. Can you subpoena him? This isn't a court proceeding. It's an internal investigation with external oversight. Okonkwo removed her reading glasses and rubbed her eyes. I can request an interview. I can note his absence in my report, but I can't compel him to testify. What about the other incidents? The 6 people on the list? 4 have agreed to participate. Monsieur Jackson and D. Williams have declined. Both cited concerns about retaliation. Okonkwo opened a folder on the table. Kay Mensah is cooperating fully. Her account is detailed and consistent with the pattern we've identified. Renata nodded. Keisha Mensah had called twice more since that first night, each conversation adding another piece to the puzzle. She'd been turned away from a job interview after a security guard claimed she didn't look like an IT candidate. The interview had been rescheduled twice, then quietly canceled. No one had ever explained why. What about the email? Renata asked. The one from the night before my incident. The one that was marked legal privilege in the discovery documents? Okonkwo's expression tightened. That's where things get complicated. The email had surfaced during the document review, a single message sent at 11:47 p.m. on Saturday, March 16, 2024, the night before Renata's confrontation in the parking garage. From, to, date, March 16th, 2024, 11:47 p.m. Subject: Sunday coverage. Make sure B shift knows. We don't need any surprises tomorrow. If anyone shows up who doesn't look like they belong, handle it. You know the drill. The email had been flagged by Athon's legal department before Okonkwo could access the full text. Attorney-client privilege, they claimed. Work product doctrine. The usual shields that corporations deployed when they had something to hide. I've filed a motion to compel production, Okonkwo said. But Athon's outside counsel is fighting it. They claim the email is protected communication between in-house counsel and security personnel regarding routine operational matters. Routine operational matters. Renata's voice was flat. Someone sent an email telling security to handle anyone who doesn't look like they belong, and they're calling that routine? Welcome to corporate litigation. Okonkwo closed her folder. The motion will take weeks to resolve. In the meantime, I'm building the case with what we have. The pattern is clear. The documentation is solid. But without that email, and without Washington's testimony, the question of intent becomes harder to prove. Intent matters for criminal charges. Does it matter for an internal investigation? It matters for everything. Okonkwo met her eyes. If this was a series of individual mistakes by individual employees, the company can claim ignorance, training failure, isolated incidents. But if that email shows coordinated direction from someone in leadership, if it proves that the pattern was intentional, that's a different conversation entirely. Renata thought about the anonymous messages, the blocked numbers, the way Washington had disappeared overnight without a word. Someone knows what's in that email, she said, and they're doing everything they can to make sure it stays buried. The investigation takes months. The truth takes longer. But justice? Justice takes people who refuse to look away. If you're one of those people, hit subscribe, because this story isn't over. 6 weeks into the investigation, the pressure began to show. Jeffrey Stanton, the CFO, had become noticeably colder in leadership meetings. He'd stopped making eye contact with Renata, stopped acknowledging her contributions, started scheduling executive sessions that somehow never included her. Harrison Locke, the HR director, had adopted a strategy of aggressive helpfulness, offering to facilitate Renata's transition, suggesting that her unique perspective might be better utilized in a less visible role, hinting that the investigation was creating tension that was affecting morale. And Meredith Vance, still on paid suspension, had hired a lawyer. A good one. The kind who specialized in making problems go away. Renata learned about the lawyer from Okonkwo, who'd received a letter demanding that all interview transcripts be sealed pending a review of potential defamation claims. She's threatening to sue? Renata couldn't quite keep the disbelief out of her voice. She's threatening to make this expensive. Okonkwo set the letter on the conference table. It's a standard intimidation tactic. Bury the other side in legal fees, drag out the process until everyone's exhausted. Hope that the company decides settling is cheaper than fighting. And if the company does decide that? Then Vance walks away with a severance package and an NDA. She never works here again, but she never faces real accountability either. Okonkwo's voice was matter-of-fact. That's how most of these cases end. Not with justice, with settlements, quiet agreements, checks written and documents shredded. Renata looked at the letter. The letterhead was from one of Atlanta's most prestigious law firms, the same firm, she noted, that had represented Athon in 3 previous discrimination settlements. They're all connected, she said quietly. The company, the law firm, the people who want this to disappear. It's not a conspiracy, it's just business as usual. That's exactly what it is. Okonkwo picked up the letter and filed it away. The question is whether we can make business as usual too expensive to continue. The breakthrough came in week 8. It started with a phone call from Keisha Mensah. "Ms. Holloway, I found something." Her voice was shaking. With fear or excitement, Renata couldn't tell. "I was going through my old emails, the ones from when I was applying for the job at Ethon, and I found a forwarded message that I'd forgotten about." "What kind of message?" "An internal email, from someone in HR. I think they sent it to me by accident. It was attached to my interview confirmation, but it wasn't meant for me. I didn't think anything of it at the time, but now—" Renata sat up straighter. "Can you forward it to me?" "I already sent it to Ms. Okonkwo, but I wanted you to see it too, because the person who sent it, the person who wrote the original email, is still working at Ethon." Renata's phone buzzed. Email notification. She opened it. From K. Mensah at Redacted to R. Holloway at athon.com. Date May 14, 2024, 3:47 p.m. Subject FW. Attached email. Ms. Holloway, see attached. The original was sent January 8, 2024, 3 days before my scheduled interview. I think you'll find the sender's name interesting. Keisha Mensah. Renata opened the attachment. From hlock@ethan.com to securityops@ethan.com. Date January 8, 2024, 9:12 p.m. Subject interview coverage, Thursday. Team, we have several external candidates coming through this week. Please ensure lobby security is appropriately staffed. If anyone arrives who doesn't match the profile we discussed, use your judgment. We don't need any uncomfortable situations in the executive elevator. Harrison Locke, Director, Human Resources. Doesn't match the profile. Use your judgment. Uncomfortable situations. Renata read the email 3 times. Then she picked up her phone and called Okonkwo. "I just saw it," Okonkwo said, before Renata could speak. "This changes everything. This isn't a security guard acting on his own. This isn't a middle manager with personal bias. This is the HR director, the person responsible for hiring and compliance, sending coded instructions to discriminate against job candidates. Can you use it?" "I can do better than that." Okonkwo's voice had an edge Renata hadn't heard before. "This email wasn't marked privileged. It wasn't sent to legal. It's a direct communication between HR and security about candidate screening, which means it's admissible, which means Harrison Locke just became a target of this investigation." The interview with Harrison Locke took place on a Thursday afternoon in late May. Renata wasn't present. Okonkwo had advised her to maintain distance from the formal proceedings, but she watched the aftermath unfold in real time. Locke emerged from the conference room at 4:17 p.m., his face the color of old chalk. He walked directly to his office, closed the door, and didn't come out for the rest of the day. By Friday morning, his resignation was on Victoria Hartwell's desk. From hlock@ethan.com to vhartwell@ethan.com. Date May 24, 2024, 6:02 a.m. Subject resignation. Victoria, after much reflection, I have decided to pursue opportunities outside Ethon Industries. My last day will be June 7, 2024. I wish the company continued success. Harrison Locke, opportunities outside Ethon. Renata read the email aloud in Hartwell's office, her voice carefully neutral. That's one way to phrase it. His lawyer negotiated the language. Hartwell's expression was unreadable. In exchange for a quiet departure, we agreed not to pursue civil action for his role in the pattern of discrimination. And criminal charges? That's not my decision. If the EEOC or the Department of Justice wants to pursue federal civil rights violations, that's their prerogative. Hartwell leaned back in her chair. But I'll be honest with you, Ms. Holloway. The chances of federal prosecution for something like this are slim. The DOJ has limited resources. They prioritize cases with clear evidence of intentional discrimination by public officials. Private companies, even when the pattern is obvious, tend to fall through the cracks. So he walks away. He walks away with a tarnished reputation and no severance. His LinkedIn profile will show a sudden departure from a company under investigation. Anyone who does their due diligence will connect the dots. Hartwell's voice hardened. It's not prison, but it's not nothing. Renata said nothing. She'd spent 15 years in corporate litigation. She knew how these stories ended, not with handcuffs, with resignations, with quiet agreements, with patterns that continued under different names in different buildings. "What about Vance?" she asked finally. "That's more complicated." Meredith Vance's lawyer had been busy. In the 6 weeks since her suspension, she'd filed 3 separate complaints. One with the National Labor Relations Board claiming retaliatory termination, one with the Georgia Department of Labor alleging hostile work environment, and one with Ethon's own Internal Ethics Committee accusing Renata Holloway of coordinating a campaign of harassment against her. The claims were ridiculous. They were also, Okonkwo admitted, strategically brilliant. "She's creating a paper trail of victimhood," Okonkwo explained during their weekly briefing. "If the company fires her, she sues for retaliation. If the company keeps her suspended, she claims she's being denied due process. If the company offers a settlement, she demands more money, and a public statement clearing her name. She handcuffed someone in a parking garage based on the color of their skin. She's been involved in at least 3 documented incidents of racial profiling, and she's positioning herself as the victim?" "That's how these things work." Okonkwo's voice was tired. "The system isn't designed to deliver justice. It's designed to manage liability, and Vance's lawyer knows exactly how to exploit that. So what do? We keep building the case, we keep documenting, and we hope that when the final report comes out, the weight of evidence is too heavy for anyone to ignore." The Okonkwo report, as it came to be known internally, was delivered to Victoria Hartwell on June 18, 2024, exactly 3 months after Renata's confrontation in the parking garage. The document was 247 pages long. It contained interview transcripts, email chains, security footage analysis, statistical breakdowns of incident patterns, and a detailed timeline of institutional failures dating back 5 years. The executive summary was damning. Okonkwo and Associates. Independent Investigation Report. Ethon Industries. June 18, 2024. Executive Summary. This investigation was initiated following an incident on March 17, 2024, in which a newly hired regional director was detained in the executive parking garage based on her race and the perceived value of her vehicle. Over the course of 12 weeks, our team conducted 63 interviews, reviewed approximately 4,200 documents, and analyzed security footage totaling 847 hours. Findings. 1. Pattern of discrimination. We identified 14 incidents over the past 5 years in which Black employees, contractors, or visitors were stopped, questioned, detained, or removed from Ethon facilities based on racial profiling. In all 14 cases, the individuals were later confirmed to be authorized personnel. 2. Systemic failures. The pattern of discrimination was enabled by inadequate training, inconsistent enforcement of security protocols, and a culture of deference to certain long-tenured employees who operated outside normal accountability structures. 3. Leadership involvement. At least 2 members of senior leadership, one in HR, one in security, actively contributed to the pattern through coded communications that encouraged discriminatory enforcement. 4. Evidence destruction. There is credible evidence that multiple attempts were made to delete security footage and other documentation related to discriminatory incidents. At least one such attempt occurred during the March 17, 2024 incident. 5. Witness intimidation. Multiple witnesses reported receiving threats or pressure to withdraw from the investigation. One key witness resigned abruptly during the investigation, under circumstances that suggest possible coercion. Recommendations. Detailed recommendations follow in Section 7. Renata read the summary 3 times. Then she read it again. 14 incidents, 5 years, 2 senior leaders, evidence destruction, witness intimidation, and still, somehow, she knew it wasn't enough. The board meeting was scheduled for June 25, 2024. Renata arrived at 8 a.m., an hour early, the Okonkwo report tucked under her arm. The conference room was already filling. Board members she recognized from orientation materials, outside counsel she'd never seen before, and Victoria Hartwell at the head of the table, her expression unreadable. Jeffrey Stanton sat to her right. He hadn't looked at Renata since the investigation began. He wasn't looking at her now. "Let's begin," Hartwell said. The next 3 hours were a masterclass in institutional self-preservation. The board accepted the Okonkwo report in principle. They acknowledged the serious concerns raised by the investigation. They committed to comprehensive reforms that would ensure nothing like this ever happens again. And then they began negotiating the details. Meredith Vance would be terminated, but with a severance package that included 6 months' salary, continued health insurance, and a non-disclosure agreement that prevented her from discussing the circumstances of her departure. In exchange, she would drop all pending complaints and waive her right to sue. Kyle Brennan would be suspended for 30 days without pay, then reassigned to non-public-facing duties at a satellite facility in Macon. He would undergo mandatory bias training. He would remain employed. Dorian Pike would receive a letter of reprimand and mandatory retraining. He would keep his position. The attempted evidence deletion would be noted in his personnel file, but not reported to law enforcement. Cynthia Aldridge, the assistant who had recorded and distributed the parking garage video, would receive a written warning for unauthorized distribution of company materials. No other action, and Harrison Locke, who had already resigned, would face no further consequences. The email he'd sent, the smoking gun that proved leadership involvement, would be sealed as part of the investigation file, accessible only to Athon's legal department. "This is accountability?" Renata's voice cut through the murmur of agreement around the table. "One termination with a golden parachute, one suspension, 3 letters in personnel files, and the person who gave the orders walks away clean." Stanton finally looked at her. His expression was cold. "Ms. Holloway, with respect, you've been with this company for 3 months. Some of us have been here for decades. We understand how these things work. We understand the balance between accountability and institutional stability. We understand—" "What I understand, Mr. Stanton, is that 14 people were profiled, detained, and humiliated over 5 years. What I understand is that someone in this company sent an email telling security to handle anyone who doesn't look like they belong. What I understand is that when I tried to park my car, in my assigned space, I was handcuffed by a security guard who never bothered to check if I was authorized to be there." She stood. "And what I understand is that every person at this table has the power to demand real accountability, to report the evidence destruction to law enforcement, to refer the civil rights violations to the EOC, to show the world that Athon Industries takes discrimination seriously, not just in press releases, but in practice." Silence. Hartwell's expression hadn't changed, but something in her eyes had shifted, a flicker of something that might have been respect, or regret, or both. "The board's decision is final," she said quietly, "but your concerns are noted, and the reforms we're implementing, the external audits, the revised training protocols, the new reporting structures, those are real. They may not be everything you want, but they're more than this company has ever done before." Renata looked around the table, at the board members who wouldn't meet her eyes, at Stanton, whose expression said he'd already won, at the lawyers and consultants who'd spent 3 hours finding ways to minimize consequences and protect reputations. "I'll be filing my own report with the EEOC," she said, "as is my right under Title VII, and I'll be recommending that any employee who experienced discrimination at Athon consider doing the same." She picked up her copy of the Okonkwo report. "This meeting is adjourned, for me at least. I have work to do." She walked out without looking back. Sometimes justice isn't a moment. It's a marathon. And the people who run it? They're the ones who refuse to quit. If you're still here, still watching, still caring, you're one of them. Subscribe, share, and stay tuned. Because the ending of this story, it's not what anyone expected. The press release went out on June 28, 2024. Aethon Industries announces comprehensive security reform Atlanta GA. Following an internal review, Aethon Industries today announced a series of reforms to its security policies and procedures. The changes include mandatory bias training for all security personnel, revised incident documentation requirements, enhanced oversight of parking facility operations, and regular third-party audits of security practices. Aethon is committed to creating a workplace where every employee feels safe, respected, and valued, said CEO Victoria Hartwell. The reforms we're announcing today reflect that commitment and will help ensure that all members of our community are treated with dignity. The company also confirmed the departure of several employees in connection with recent policy violations, though no names were released due to privacy considerations. Renata read the press release on her phone, sitting in the Honda in the parking garage at 7:43 a.m. Comprehensive reform. Internal review. Policy violations. No mention of discrimination. No mention of the pattern. No mention of the 14 people who'd been profiled over 5 years, or the emails that proved leadership involvement, or the evidence that had been destroyed. Just corporate language, carefully crafted to acknowledge nothing while appearing to address everything. She saved a screenshot of the press release. Documentation. Always documentation. The EEOC complaint was filed on July 2, 2024, exactly 107 days after the parking garage incident. Renata filed her own complaint first, documenting everything: the detention, the handcuffs, the threats, the anonymous messages. Then she helped Keisha Mensah file hers. Then 2 other former employees who'd come forward after seeing the press release. 4 complaints, 4 separate incidents, 4 testimonies to a pattern that Aethon had spent years denying. The EEOC investigator, a woman named Patricia Odom, who'd been doing this work for 23 years, reviewed the documentation with the weariness of someone who'd seen it all before. "This is solid," she said during their initial interview. "The pattern is clear. The documentation is thorough. The Okonkwo report provides institutional context that most complaints lack." So what happens now? Now we investigate. We request documents from Aethon. We conduct our own interviews. We determine whether there's sufficient evidence of systemic discrimination to warrant further action. And how long does that take? Odom smiled, the tired smile of someone who'd answered this question 1,000 times. Months, sometimes years. The EEOC has a backlog of over 70,000 cases. We prioritize based on severity, evidence quality, and potential for systemic impact. She paused. Your case scores high on all 3, but that doesn't mean it moves fast. And if you find evidence of systemic discrimination, then we try to negotiate a settlement with the company. If that fails, we can file suit in federal court, but most cases settle. It's faster, cheaper, and guarantees a result. Odom's voice was matter-of-fact. The question isn't usually whether discrimination occurred. It's how much the company is willing to pay to make it go away. Renata thought about Meredith Vance's severance package, Harrison Locke's quiet resignation, the press release that acknowledged nothing while promising everything. What if I don't want it to go away? Odom looked at her for a long moment. Then you're going to need patience, Ms. Holloway. A lot of patience. And a very good lawyer. The summer passed slowly. Renata continued her work as regional director, overseeing operations in 4 states, managing 200 employees, attending meetings where people who'd once dismissed her now treated her with careful, calculated respect. The reforms announced in the press release were implemented, sort of. The bias training consisted of a 2-hour online webinar that most employees clicked through without watching. The enhanced oversight meant an additional checkbox on incident reports. The regular third-party audits were scheduled for once a year, with results reported only to the board. Cosmetic changes, box checking, the appearance of progress without the substance. But there were small victories too. Keisha Mensah was offered a job at Ethon, a different position than the one she'd originally applied for, but a real offer with real compensation. She accepted. Her first day was August 12, 2024. Renata made sure she had a parking space in the executive lot. 2 of the security guards who'd been present during the incident requested transfers to other facilities. One of them, a young man named Torres who'd been in the garage but hadn't participated in the confrontation, sent Renata an email apologizing for not speaking up sooner. She saved the email. Documentation. And somewhere in Georgia, the Department of Justice opened a preliminary inquiry into potential civil rights concerns at Ethon Industries. Not a formal investigation, just a preliminary inquiry. But it was something. The parking lot encounter happened on a Thursday evening in early October. Renata was leaving late, 9:17 p.m. according to her phone, walking across the nearly empty garage toward the Honda. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead. The concrete pillars cast long shadows, the usual sounds of a corporate facility at night: climate control, distant traffic, the occasional ping of an elevator. She was halfway to her car when she saw him. Kyle Brennan. Standing by a concrete pillar, hands in the pockets of civilian clothes, no uniform, no badge, just a man in jeans and a jacket waiting in the shadows. Renata stopped. Her hand moved toward her purse, toward the pepper spray she'd started carrying after the 3rd anonymous message. Miss Holloway. His voice was different than she remembered, smaller, less certain. Mr. Brennan, you're not supposed to be on company property during your suspension. I know, He stepped forward, into the light. I needed to say something. She didn't move. Her hand stayed near the purse. I'm sorry. The words hung in the air between them. I was just following orders. Vance said handle it, so I handled it. I didn't think about what I was doing. I just saw what I expected to see and acted accordingly. That's the problem, Mr. Brennan. I know. He ran a hand through his hair. I've been thinking about it, every day since. The look on your face when I put those cuffs on. You weren't scared. You weren't angry. You were just disappointed. Like I was exactly what you expected me to be. Renata said nothing. I'm not fighting the suspension, he continued, and I'm enrolling in a program. Real training, not the company webinar. I want to understand why I did what I did, why I saw a black woman in an old car and immediately assumed she didn't belong. And you came here tonight to tell me this? I came here because I couldn't live with myself if I didn't. He met her eyes. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I'm just asking you to know that what happened that day, it changed something in me, and I'm trying to be better. A long silence stretched between them. Renata looked at this man, this former police officer, this security guard who'd put her in handcuffs without a second thought, and tried to see beyond the uniform he wasn't wearing, tried to see the person underneath the prejudice. Accountability isn't about what you tell me in a parking lot, Mr. Brennan. It's about what you do when no one's watching. He nodded slowly. I know. She walked past him toward the Honda. At the driver's door, she paused. The training you're doing, the program, if it's real, if you actually go through it and come out the other side understanding something you didn't understand before, then maybe that's worth something. She opened the door. But the test isn't whether you apologize to me. The test is what happens the next time you see someone who doesn't look like they belong. She got in the car. Good night, Mr. Brennan. The engine turned over. 243,000 miles and counting. She pulled out of the garage without looking back. The EEOC investigation concluded in November 2024, 8 months after the parking garage incident, 5 months after the formal complaint was filed. The findings were mixed. On one hand, the EEOC determined that sufficient evidence exists to support a finding of systemic discrimination in Aethon Industries' security practices. The pattern was real. The documentation was solid. The institutional failures were clear. On the other hand, the EEOC recommended a conciliation agreement rather than federal litigation. The agency was understaffed, underfunded, and facing a backlog that stretched into years. A settlement was faster. A settlement was certain. A settlement would provide compensation to the victims without the risk of a trial that could drag on indefinitely. The terms of the settlement were negotiated over 6 weeks. Aethon agreed to pay $1.2 million to the 4 complainants, $300,000 each. The company agreed to implement enhanced oversight of security practices for 3 years, with annual reports submitted to the EEOC. The company agreed to post notices in all facilities informing employees of their rights under Title VII. In exchange, the complainants agreed to release all claims and waive the right to future litigation related to the incidents described in their complaints. The settlement was announced in January 2025, 10 months after the parking garage incident. Aethon Industries reaches agreement with EEOC on security practices. Atlanta, GA. Aethon Industries today announced a conciliation agreement with the U.S. Equal Employment Opportunity Commission resolving claims related to security practices at the company's Atlanta headquarters. Under the terms of the agreement, Aethon will implement enhanced training and oversight measures and provide compensation to individuals who raised concerns about security procedures. This agreement reflects Aethon's commitment to continuous improvement, said CEO Victoria Hartwell. We have learned from this experience and are confident that the measures we've implemented will create a more inclusive environment for all employees. The EEOC noted that the agreement was reached without any admission of wrongdoing by Aethon Industries. No admission of wrongdoing. Renata read those words on her phone, sitting in her corner office on the 42nd floor. She'd received her portion of the settlement, $300,000 minus attorney's fees. More money than she'd ever had in savings. More than the Honda was worth 100 times over. It wasn't justice, but it was something. Yeah, Bill. The final board meeting of 2025 was held on a gray December morning, the Atlanta skyline shrouded in winter fog. Renata sat in her usual seat, the Okonkwo report, now 18 months old, still in her briefcase. She'd stopped bringing it to meetings months ago. No one wanted to talk about it anymore. The investigation was closed. The settlement was paid. The reforms were implemented, such as they were. Time to move on. But some things couldn't be moved on from. Before we adjourn, Victoria Hartwell said, I want to acknowledge something. The room fell quiet. 20 months ago, an employee of this company was detained in our parking garage. She was handcuffed. She was threatened. She was treated as a criminal for the crime of driving an old car while being black. Hartwell's eyes found Renata's across the table. That employee is still here. She's still doing her job. She's still making this company better, even when we've made it hard for her to do so. She paused. I owe her an apology. Not the kind that comes in press releases or settlement agreements, the kind that comes from one person to another. Silence. I'm sorry, Ms. Holloway, for what happened to you, for what we failed to prevent, and for the limits of what we were willing to do afterward. Renata looked at the CEO, this woman who'd tried, in her own constrained way, to do the right thing, who'd hired an external investigator when she could have buried the whole thing, who'd pushed for reforms when the board wanted to settle quickly and quietly. It wasn't enough. It was never going to be enough. But it was real. Thank you, Ms. Hartwell. The words felt strange in her mouth. Not quite forgiveness, not quite acceptance, just acknowledgement that someone had tried, that the effort, however inadequate, had mattered. There's one more thing, Hartwell continued. Effective January 1st, the board has approved the creation of a new position, Chief Equity Officer. The role will report directly to me and will have oversight of all hiring, security, and compliance functions. She looked at Renata. I'd like you to consider applying. That night, Renata sat in the Honda in her parking space, the same space where it had all begun, 20 months and a lifetime ago. The garage was quiet. The fluorescent lights hummed. Somewhere above her, 44 floors of glass and steel contained the machinery of corporate power, the meetings and memos and decisions that shaped the lives of thousands of people. She'd been offered a promotion, Chief Equity Officer, a chance to change the system from the inside, to make sure what happened to her never happened to anyone else. She hadn't answered yet. Her phone buzzed, email notification. She opened it. From T. Washington at no to R. Holloway at athon.com, date December 18th, 2025, 9:47 p.m. Subject, no subject. Ms. Holloway, I'm sorry I disappeared. I'm sorry I couldn't testify. I'm sorry I wasn't there when it mattered. They threatened my daughter. That's all I can say. Maybe one day I'll be able to say more. The email from the night before your incident, the one they marked privileged. I saw it before it was redacted. I know who sent it. It wasn't Locke. He was just following orders. The order came from higher up, much higher. Be careful who you trust. I hope you got the justice you deserved. I hope the system worked for once. But if it didn't, if they buried the truth again, know that someone out there knows the truth. Someone is keeping records. Documentation, right? Always documentation. TWPS. The footage I saved that night, the original unedited footage, I made a copy before I left. It's in a safe place. If you ever need it, you know how to reach me. Renata stared at the screen. They threatened my daughter. The order came from higher up. Be careful who you trust. She looked up at the building, the glass and steel monument to corporate ambition, the 44 floors of secrets and settlements and carefully managed reputations. Jeffrey Stanton was still CFO. The email was still sealed. And somewhere, in a safe place, there was footage that could prove everything. She saved the email. Screenshot. Forward to her personal account. Print to PDF. Documentation. Always documentation. Vatum. The Honda's engine turned over. 243,000 miles and counting. She pulled out of the garage, past the security booth, past the cameras that were always watching, always recording. At the gate, she paused. The barrier rose smoothly this time. No glitches, no malfunctions. Just a clear path forward. She thought about the job offer. Chief Equity Officer. A chance to fight the system from inside it. She thought about Washington's email. The threat to his daughter. The order from higher up. The footage in a safe place. She thought about Meredith Vance, somewhere in Atlanta with her severance package and her NDA, probably already planning her next career move. About Kyle Brennan, in Macon, going through his training program, maybe changing, maybe not. About Harrison Locke, quietly practicing law somewhere else, his role in the pattern known only to those who'd seen the sealed documents. She thought about the 14 people who'd been profiled over 5 years, about the settlements that were paid, and the apologies that weren't given, about the policy changes that looked good on paper and meant nothing in practice. And she thought about her father. 22 years driving this same car to the same job, building something he believed in, leaving behind a legacy that couldn't be measured in market value. Some things weren't about winning. Some things were about not letting them make you quit. She pressed the accelerator. The Honda pulled through the gate, headlights cutting through the December darkness. Behind her, the Ethon Industries building glowed against the night sky. 44 floors of glass and steel, cameras and secrets, power and pretense. Ahead of her, the highway stretched toward home. She didn't know if she'd take the job. She didn't know if the truth about the email would ever come out. She didn't know if Stanton was the one who gave the order, or if it was someone else, someone even higher, someone whose name wasn't in any of the documents she'd seen. But she knew one thing. She wasn't done. The engine hummed. The miles clicked over. 243,000, 243,001, still running. Shakcha. 3 days before Christmas, Renata Holloway accepted the position of Chief Equity Officer at Aethon Industries. Her first official act was to request access to all sealed investigation documents, including the email marked legal privilege from the night before her detention. Her request was denied. She filed an appeal, and in a small apartment in Decatur, Georgia, she opened a new notebook, the same leather-bound style her father had used for decades, and wrote the date at the top of the first page, December 22, 2025, beginning of a new investigation. Below that, she wrote 3 words, "Follow the pattern." The last message came on Christmas Eve. From to Art Holloway at aethon.com. Date, December 24, 2025, 11:47 p.m. Subject, no subject. You should have taken the settlement and walked away. Now you're Chief Equity Officer. Now you have access. Now you're asking questions we spent years making sure no one would ask. You think you're safe because you have a title? You think the board will protect you? Ask Harrison Locke how much his title protected him. Ask Terrell Washington what happened when he tried to do the right thing. This is your last warning. Some patterns can't be broken. Some truths are meant to stay buried. Walk away while you still can. Renata read the email once. Then she opened her notebook and wrote it down. Every word, every timestamp, every detail. She saved a screenshot. She forwarded a copy to her attorney. And then, she did something she hadn't done in 20 months of anonymous threats. She replied. To blocked sender. From r.holloway@aethon.com. Date, December 24, 2025, 11:52 p.m. Subject, RE, no subject. I know who you are. I have the footage, and I'm not going anywhere. Renata Holloway, Chief Equity Officer, Aethon Industries. She hit send. Then she closed the laptop, turned off the lights, and went to bed. Outside, the December wind rattled the windows. The Honda sat in the driveway, snow gathering on its 25-year-old hood. Tomorrow was Christmas. The day after that, she would go back to work. And the day after that, she would begin following the pattern. Wherever it led, however deep it went, whatever it cost. Some battles couldn't be won in a single fight. Some justice couldn't be delivered in a single verdict. Some patterns could only be broken by people who refused to stop documenting, refused to stop asking questions, refused to stop showing up. Renata Holloway had spent her whole life being underestimated. They still didn't know who they were dealing with, but they would. The reply she sent on Christmas Eve changed everything. Within 48 hours, 3 things happened. First, Jeffrey Stanton requested an emergency meeting with Victoria Hartwell, a meeting that lasted 4 hours and ended with Stanton emerging from the CEO's office looking like he'd aged 10 years. Second, the anonymous messages stopped. Completely. No more blocked numbers, no more threats. Just silence. The kind of silence that felt more dangerous than words. Third, a package arrived at Renata's apartment in Decatur. No return address, no postmark. Just a manila envelope tucked into her mailbox sometime between midnight and 6 a.m. on December 27th. Inside, a USB drive, and a handwritten note on plain white paper. The original footage. Unedited. Time-stamped. You'll know what to do with it. TW, PS. Check the audio at 4:41 p.m. Brennan's body cam wasn't the only one recording. Renata didn't plug the drive into her personal computer. She wasn't naive enough to trust unknown files, even from someone she believed was an ally. Instead, she drove to Marcus Chen Reyes's office, her attorney, the man who'd been with her since the beginning, and handed him the envelope. "Chain of custody starts now," she said. "I want this analyzed by a forensic specialist before anyone views the contents. I want authentication. I want timestamps verified. And I want everything documented." Chen Reyes weighed the envelope in his hand. "You think this is real?" I think Terrell Washington spent 14 years watching this company bury evidence. I think he saved what he could before they forced him out. And I think whatever's on that drive is the reason someone threatened his daughter. The attorney nodded slowly. I know a guy. Former FBI. Runs a digital forensics firm in Buckhead. He can have this analyzed within 72 hours. Do it. She stood to leave, then paused at the door. Marcus, if this is what I think it is, if the audio proves what I suspect, we're not just talking about a civil rights case anymore. We're talking about conspiracy, obstruction, maybe criminal liability for people who are still in positions of power. Chen Reyes met her eyes. You ready for that fight? She thought about her father. 22 years, 243,000 miles. A legacy that couldn't be measured in settlements or severance packages. I've been ready my whole life. The forensic analysis took 61 hours. The results arrived on December 30th, 2 days before Renata was scheduled to officially begin her new role as Chief Equity Officer. Chen Reyes called her at 7:14 a.m. You need to come to my office. Now. She was there in 23 minutes. The forensic specialist, a trim man in his 50s named Harold Vance, no relation to Meredith, had set up a laptop in Chen Reyes's conference room. The USB drive sat in an evidence bag beside it, chain of custody form already signed and dated. The drive is authentic, Vance said without preamble. No signs of tampering. The files are original recordings from Aethon's security system, downloaded on March 17, 2024, at 5:14 p.m., consistent with the timeline Mr. Washington described in his email to you. He pulled up a video file. This is the parking garage footage. 4 cameras, synchronized. The timestamps match the incident report exactly. Renata watched herself on screen. A tiny figure in a gray suit standing beside the Honda, being approached by Meredith Vance, being confronted by Kyle Brennan, being handcuffed. She'd seen this footage before. The company had released selected portions during the investigation, but she'd never seen what came next. Watch the timestamp, Vance said. 4:41 p.m. On screen, Brennan's hand moved to his body cam. The red recording light went dark, but in the corner of the frame, partially obscured by a concrete pillar, another figure was visible. Someone in a suit. Someone holding a phone. Enhance that, Renata said. Vance clicked a few keys. The image sharpened. The figure was Dorian Pike, security systems manager, the man who'd tried to delete the footage before Washington preserved it. And he was recording. His phone's audio synced to the facility's Bluetooth network, Vance explained. Standard security feature, allows supervisors to capture incidents without visible recording. The audio was automatically backed up to a secondary server that Pike didn't know about. He clicked again. And suddenly, voices filled the room. Sure. The audio was clear, too clear. The kind of quality that came from professional-grade equipment, not a phone held at a distance. Pike's voice came first. Brennan, hold her until I get confirmation. Then Brennan. Confirmation of what? She showed ID. She has an email. I don't care about the email. Stanton said anyone who doesn't match the profile gets held until he clears it personally. A pause. Then Brennan again, uncertain. Stanton? The CFO? Did I stutter? Hold her. Cuff her if you have to. I'll handle the rest. Another pause. Then, what if she's legitimate? Pike's laugh was cold. Look at her. Look at that car. She's not legitimate. Trust me. The audio continued, capturing the confrontation, the handcuffs, Washington's intervention, but Renata had stopped listening. Stanton said anyone who doesn't match the profile gets held. The CFO. The man who'd sat in that boardroom 18 months ago, negotiating settlements, protecting reputations, making sure the pattern stayed buried. The man who was still in his position, still on the board, still making decisions that affected thousands of employees. This is it, she said quietly. This is the proof. Reyes was already reaching for his phone. "I'm calling the DOJ. This isn't an EEOC matter anymore. This is federal obstruction of justice." The call to the Department of Justice was made at 8:47 a.m. on December 30th, 2024. The preliminary response came 6 hours later. A civil rights attorney named Darnell Okafor, senior counsel in the DOJ's Civil Rights Division, requested an immediate meeting. He flew to Atlanta the next morning. The meeting took place in Reyes's conference room on New Year's Eve, while the rest of the city prepared for celebrations and countdowns. Okafor was a tall man with graying temples and the kind of calm intensity that came from decades of fighting battles most people didn't know existed. He listened to the audio 3 times without speaking. Then he reviewed the chain of custody documentation. Then he asked questions, precise, surgical questions that revealed he understood exactly what he was looking at. This audio establishes that the CFO of a Fortune 500 company gave direct orders to detain individuals based on racial profiling, he said finally. It also establishes that at least one security supervisor knew those orders were illegal and followed them anyway. "What can you do with it?" Renata asked. "Officially, I can recommend opening a pattern or practice investigation under 42 U.S.C. 441. That gives us authority to examine the company's policies, interview employees, and potentially seek a consent decree requiring systemic reforms." "And unofficially?" Okafor met her eyes. "Unofficially, Ms. Holloway, you just handed us the most damning evidence of corporate civil rights violations I've seen in 15 years. This isn't just about Aethon. This is about sending a message to every company that thinks it can hide discrimination behind settlement agreements and NDAs." He closed his folder. "The question is whether you're willing to see this through. A federal investigation takes time, years potentially. There will be countersuits. There will be attempts to discredit you. There will be pressure from the company, from their lawyers, from people you thought were allies." Renata thought about the anonymous messages, the threats to Washington's daughter, the way Harrison Locke had disappeared without consequences, the way Meredith Vance had walked away with 6 months' salary and a non-disclosure agreement. "I've been documenting this for 20 months, she said. "I'm not stopping now." The DOJ investigation was announced on January 15, 2025, 2 weeks after Renata officially became Chief Equity Officer. Department of Justice opens investigation into Aethon Industries, Washington, D.C., the U.S. Department of Justice announced today that it has opened a pattern or practice investigation into Aethon Industries, a Fortune 500 logistics company headquartered in Atlanta, Georgia. The investigation will examine allegations that the company engaged in systemic discrimination in its security practices, including racial profiling of employees and visitors. The Civil Rights Division is committed to ensuring that all Americans are treated with dignity and respect in the workplace, said Assistant Attorney General Ramey. "When we receive credible evidence of systemic discrimination, we have a responsibility to investigate." Aethon Industries declined to comment on the investigation. Jeffrey Stanton resigned on January 22, 2025. His departure was announced in a terse press release that cited personal reasons and a desire to pursue other opportunities. No severance was mentioned. No transition plan was described, just a statement that his last day would be January 31st. Renata learned about the resignation the same way everyone else did, through the company-wide email that arrived at 6:03 a.m. She was sitting in the Honda in her parking space when she read it. The same space where it had all begun. The same space where she'd been handcuffed for the crime of driving an old car while being black. She saved a screenshot of the email. Documentation. Always documentation. Then she went to work. The system doesn't change overnight. It changes one documented incident at a time. One refusal to look away. One person who keeps showing up. If you're still here, if you're still watching, you're part of that change. Subscribe, share, and remember, the pattern only breaks when we refuse to let it continue. The federal investigation continued through the spring and summer of 2025. DOJ attorneys interviewed 127 current and former Ethon employees. They reviewed over 50,000 documents. They analyzed security footage, email chains, HR records, and settlement agreements dating back a decade. The findings were released in September 2025, 18 months after the parking garage incident that started it all. Department of Justice findings. Ethon Industries. The Civil Rights Division has determined that Ethon Industries engaged in a pattern or practice of discrimination in its security operations, in violation of Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Key findings include: over a 10-year period, Black employees and visitors were stopped, questioned, or detained at rates 4.7 times higher than white individuals in similar circumstances. At least 3 members of senior leadership issued directives that encouraged or condoned discriminatory enforcement of security policies. Multiple attempts were made to destroy evidence related to discriminatory incidents, including security footage and internal communications. The company's settlement practices were designed to minimize accountability and prevent pattern evidence from accumulating. The department is seeking a consent decree requiring comprehensive reforms to Ethon's security, hiring, and compliance practices, including external monitoring for a period of 5 years. The consent decree was finalized in November 2025. Under its terms, Ethon agreed to implement comprehensive bias training for all employees, not just security personnel, establish an independent ombudsman to receive and investigate discrimination complaints, submit to quarterly audits by a court-appointed monitor, pay $4.2 million in additional compensation to individuals affected by discriminatory practices, provide annual public reports on security incidents disaggregated by race. It wasn't perfect. No one went to prison. Jeffrey Stanton faced no criminal charges. The statute of limitations on his direct involvement had expired, and the DOJ determined that proving criminal intent beyond a reasonable doubt would be challenging. He was last seen consulting for a private equity firm in Charlotte.
Dorian Pike was charged with obstruction of justice for his role in attempting to delete security footage. He pled guilty to a reduced charge and received 2 years probation and a $50,000 fine. He never worked in security again. Terrell Washington never returned to Atlanta. But 6 months after the consent decree was signed, Renata received a final email from an address she didn't recognize. From normal to r.holloway@athon.com. Date, May 14, 2026. Subject, thank you. Ms. Holloway, I watched the press conference when they announced the consent decree. I saw you standing there, next to the DOJ attorneys, next to the CEO, who finally had to admit what the company had been doing for years. You did what I couldn't do. You stayed. You fought. You won. I know it doesn't feel like winning.
I know the system is still broken. I know the people who gave the orders are still free, still working, still pretending they did nothing wrong. But my daughter is safe now. The threats stopped the day Stanton resigned. And somewhere out there, 14 people who were profiled and humiliated know that someone finally believed them. That's worth something. Thank you for not giving up. TW. P.S. Keep the car. It suits you. 2 years after the parking garage incident, Renata Holloway stood in the same space where it had all begun. E17. Executive parking. The spot that had been assigned to her before anyone knew who she was. The Honda was still there. 251,000 miles now. New tires, new battery, same engine that had carried her father to work for 22 years. She'd been offered a company car, a Lexus, fully loaded, the kind of vehicle that matched her position. She'd declined. Some things weren't about matching expectations. Some things were about remembering where you came from. She looked up at the building. 44 floors of glass and steel, the same monument to corporate power she'd seen on her first day. But something had changed. Not the building itself. The building was the same. The cameras were the same. The fluorescent light still hummed the same mechanical tune. What had changed was what happened inside. The consent decree had forced real reforms, not the cosmetic changes of the first investigation, but structural shifts that couldn't be easily undone. An independent ombudsman who reported to the board, not to HR. External auditors who showed up unannounced. Quarterly reports that were published publicly, where anyone could see them. It wasn't perfect. The system was still the system. There were still people who looked at her and saw the car before they saw the title. There were still moments when she walked into a room and felt the subtle shift of expectations, the silent recalibration of assumptions. But there were other moments too. Keisha Mensah, now a senior IT analyst, stopping by her office to share news of a promotion. Kyle Brennan, still in Macon, sending an email on the anniversary of the incident. Not an apology this time, just an update on the community program he'd started, teaching bias awareness to security professionals. A new hire, a young black woman fresh out of business school, parking her 10-year-old Toyota in the executive lot without anyone asking if she belonged. Small victories, incremental progress, the slow, grinding work of changing a system, one documented incident at a time. The final message arrived on March 17, 2026, exactly 2 years after the parking garage incident. From vhartwell@ethan.com to rholloway@ethan.com. Date, March 17, 2026, 8:00 a.m. Subject, 2 years. Renata, I've been thinking about what to say today. 2 years ago, you walked into this company and we failed you. We failed you in ways that should never have been possible, in ways that exposed everything wrong with who we were. You could have taken the settlement and left. Most people would have. Most people should have. Instead, you stayed. You fought. You made us better. I don't know if that was the right choice for you. I don't know if the cost was worth it. Only you can answer that. But I know this. Because you stayed, 14 people got justice they'd been denied for years. Because you stayed, a federal investigation exposed a pattern we'd been hiding for a decade. Because you stayed, this company had to become something different than what it was. That matters. It matters more than any settlement or consent decree or press release. Thank you for not giving up on us. Victoria. Renata read the email in her corner office, the Atlanta skyline stretching out before her, the morning sun turning the glass towers to gold. She thought about her father, the 22 years, the 243,000 miles, the legacy that couldn't be measured in market value. She thought about the pattern, the 14 people, the buried complaints, the sealed settlements, the emails marked legal privilege that were designed to hide the truth. She thought about Washington, somewhere safe now, his daughter protected, his testimony preserved in federal documents that would never be sealed. She thought about the anonymous messages that had finally stopped, the threats that had finally been silenced, the people who had tried to make her quit and failed. And she thought about the Honda, still parked in E17, still running, still carrying her forward. Some battles couldn't be won in a single fight. Some justice couldn't be delivered in a single verdict. Some patterns could only be broken by people who refused to stop showing up. She opened her notebook, the same leather-bound style her father had used, and wrote the date at the top of a new page. March 17, 2026. 2 years. Below that, she wrote 3 words. Pattern continues breaking. Then she closed the notebook, picked up her coffee, and went back to work. The engine of change was still running, 251,000 miles and counting,